Hello, everybody. I hope everybody can hear me okay and that you can see my screen. Please give me thumbs up. All good. So Darwin Fortuna here with Marco Severino's Marco Severino. We're gonna talk today about something pretty critical. We're gonna touch just the surface of that for the interest of time, but it's liability protection. Um, I will kind of zoom into uh basically some clauses. A clause is a statement or a portion of a statement within a contract that's inserted in. It's just, it's as a provision um, that we're actually adding to our contracts without mentioning any particular case or any particular reason. We just generally try to protect our company, protect our business from any additional liability. And by the way, see, if you don't know what the concept of liability is, liability, the way you can think of liability is essentially like for instance, if you go outside in a war, the bullets will hit you. You have no protection. You're exposed. That's liability, is being exposed to a damage, right? Generally, that's kind of a way of understanding it. When you use some provisions and clauses within your contract, they give you like a body armor, right? They cover you up a little bit. They expose you to what you need to be exposed, right? In our case, as architects, or liability, generally we just have to be reasonable and prudent in the way that we render our services, and we're not to provide anything outside of the reasonable and prudent that any other architect would do within the same and similar circumstances. That changes by jurisdiction, that changes by state, that changes even by project type. In this case, I'm going to focus on a clause that we added recently, and there are two. One is that whenever we write a contract, we have to tell people what we're doing, but it's actually even more important to tell people what we're not doing so that they don't expect that we're going to be doing something. So in all of our contracts, we have now this new clause. We always had that stamp professional, mechanical, electrical, plumbing, structural, and civil drawings were not included. We always had that. And then we always got a lot of questions from people saying, well, structural this, structural that. Since we do about 60-70% of our work as residential, single and two family, in the state of Massachusetts, they have us on a registered design professional bracket where basically any of these could do plans and drawings. Any of those consultants could do plans and drawings for a single and two family project. In fact, your mom and your grandma and you yourself without any stamp could do a single family and two family renovation project. But it is up to the authority having jurisdiction to add layers of requirements, right? Like by law, a person could actually do their own plumbing, but they would need a licensed plumber to pass certain inspections. There are a lot of things that change by jurisdiction. So to focus here, as architects, we can do framing plans. We can dictate where we want our foundations to go and how they relate to the rest of the building. In fact, we understand those type of buildings and those type of projects for general cases. When things get very complicated and very specific, we delegate that to a structural engineer. So that's it. We added that none of those services are included in our basic services. That was always there, but before we were saying that it was only for commercial cases. No, for all cases, we're not including that as a basic service. So then what we did was that, and this is, we're a fast growing company that learns and adapts quickly. Out of more than 1,000 projects, we've only had one situation where it was clear that something existing wasn't clear to us that should have been delineated what we were doing versus what we weren't doing. And we did a great job. But again, we're just always building upon the lessons that we learned. So now we're saying the following, and we're going to be adding this to our construction template, and we would like to add it to our notes, T101, T102 sheets. So that says it always. Structural evaluation of existing building components to be done by others and can be provided as an additional cost. Flow design is not responsible for existing structural issues, which shall be remedied prior to any work related or unrelated to our services. Why is this? If I'm supposed to be building a deck, for instance, and there was already a deck there, and you say, well, I want to use the existing footings. Who am I to fight you that you want to reuse the existing footings? What I'm going to do is those footings got to be evaluated by a structural engineer, done by others. But I'll make sure my framing is correct. Another thing that we've been doing, and Julio helped us, and actually is a pretty good case, is that we added additional footings. Why? Because we know that if this building falls, all of us are going to have to go to court and fight it in this deck, right? So we were like, you know what? You use all your 6 footings that you have. I'm still going to put 4 in my mind because we are protecting ourselves from additional liability, right? But we clearly said existing footings to be verified in field, right? But now this note, we're gonna add it in any existing conditions too, as a general note on the existing conditions. And you know, it's something that unfortunately, when you're arguing something, if it's not very, very clear, people are gonna assume the opposite. So it has to be so clear that there's no question about it. So in this case, we're adding it into our contract because that's where the liability protection starts. In fact, we engaged an attorney, and the first thing the attorney said was, send me a copy of your current contract. That was it. That's like, I don't care anything else. Send me a copy of your current contract because that contract's gonna, that's where the liability is protecting us. We also do have a clause in our contract that says that our liability is as big as the cost of the project or $1,000. We added that there. We learned it from other firms and other places. It turns out that this may be enforceable in the state of Massachusetts, and we may be covered by that. But by refunding them their fee, we're off the hook. We do have to add another layer, which is a release form when we do that. And that's another point. You don't have to get into any of this. We just want you to understand the protection, right? In this case, it's a structural, but in general, whenever you're talking about any services, make sure not to tell clients things. Here's the problem. If you mentioned it and you didn't mention that you're not doing it, they're gonna say you are doing it, right? If you mention, oh, you know, the lighting and the lighting design, they're gonna assume you are a lighting designer and you're gonna be doing, you gotta say, no, we generally put basic lights in our plans for general code compliance with the energy, but that's it. We're not specific, you know, we generally put some general finishes on your project, but we're not doing interior design services. This is not included. It's in general, just don't say more than what you need to say. That's something I'm personally working on a lot. And I've changed a lot, actually. I've noticed it. And just say exactly what you need to say. And if you don't know, it's good to say, I don't know. We may need a structural engineer. I don't know. We may need a landscape architect, or we may need an additional consultant to take care of that. Actually, Julio has a question.
So we are not going to do structural plans anymore.
We are. That's the catch. So we are, because for single and two family, we're generally good to do those. We're not going to call them structural, and we're going to call it for pricing only. So coordination and pricing only, right? Because the thing is, what we've learned also from our insurance is that if we say we're doing structural, we're not covered by them. If we are doing so, a consultant must be behind it. So what I think Marcos and I, and again, this is open to all of us, what we're doing is we're actually leaving cushion on our fees so that when these things come up, we can actually engage them and say, nope, that's covered, all good, right? What I personally have done, for instance, one project that we're doing right now, it's a little deck and they have problems with their basement too, and they were gonna do the basement. I engage an engineer and I said, we need to do an independent evaluation of this structure prior to proceeding. That immediately adds that consultant's insurance and liability to our coverage. And then our insurance covers us for the dispute between the structural and us. Does it make sense? So we're adding it in there, but we're gonna try to call it framing plan. But
Okay, so but we should work in that note, no? Like in a really good note.
in my opinion, the project
To
for
start
Nashville
putting
that
it.
we did,
To start putting it, yeah. But that one was an emergency one, but we need like a really good one.
so I agree with Julio. We did some I think I'm gonna mute you. We did some where it was an emergency kind of note that we added to our drawings. We're gonna create one kind of like the one we created in here so that it protects us. People are gonna ask and people are gonna push back. Now we're not to the degree where we're like, oh, we may lose a client. No, 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 no. Most of our clients, all of our clients, I understand it. That's why out of 1,000 or more than 1,000 projects, they understand that is an additional service. They're not doing that. That's a consultant. That's an additional consultant. But it's also something we've been adding to our language as we engage with clients. Jose has been able to go to some consultation with me and wanted to, and I mentioned it. That may be a third party review. We have consultants, but that may not be on the basic services I'm going to send you on. If that turns out to be true, that we need it, we're going to have to engage it. Check this out. We're so proactive. And again, this is meant to be very quick, but we're so proactive that today I got the first comments from one of my clients about the fact that, hey, wait a minute. So they said, because I put that clause, section 2 of no. So it's like, what's the cost to perform the structural evaluation of existing building components? Will this evaluation include remediation designs? Like things like that. They're asking all this, and I'm like, I'm actually, even the way I'm answering it is, we have had our structural consultants do this for a ranch, depending on the project, right? So even 600 site visit just to look at the post, simple stuff, right? I'm saying, that's typically reasonable amounts, but I even tell him, but I cannot promise you that. I cannot promise you, where do I say it? That typically they say, is it adequate or not adequate as it is, right? But they're already asking for that. But we deal with so many renovations. It's generally because of renovations. New projects, we know we're gonna be having the whole team, like the whole staff. But for renovations, the problem in this case is that they may be they're actually, for instance, and this has happened, we just managed it very well. Mr. Leon had his house, and the existing building had no footings at all. He knew that was extra and that was gonna be a problem. So when they had the new piece, they dug out. That's also an existing unforeseen condition. We can never dream that out that will. So, but this note right here covers us right there. Well, you know what I mean? Because then they say, well, you are the guy in charge. You got to pay for the new footings. Like, no, no, no. You didn't have footings. That's your problem, not mine. Right? That's extra. And we've been mitigating similar things, but it's never gotten to the point where it's like, oh my gosh, we must have it done. Now is when we're like, okay, we have to have the notes. So we're gonna have the notes for framing and any structural. If a structural consultant is not involved, if a structural consultant is involved, we're good to go. So I guess read the contract and make sure that is it a structural consultant being involved in the project, yes or no. And that's pretty much it for me. I have not much to share on this end, unless Marcos wants to add anything else.
I do want to add though, it's important to always keep in mind the communications within the owner. We're talking about liability, so make sure like the project number is in every email. Make sure you attach us to the communications. In this situation that we had, it was they even applaud to us of how organized our emails were. So I applaud you guys for doing that, and let's maintain keeping that that concept of liability in our minds and keeping a track of emails and making sure that even if you cannot respond a particular question, make sure like you either research it. I will get back to you with the information. So be honest with the clients too in regards to that if you don't know the answer. So.
And again, this is an ongoing process. My opinion right now, I would like people to grab this language and begin putting it on your notes as we fix our templates. Already, that literally that's on our folder structure. Copy that language and add it throughout. Just be aware of it and add it throughout in a way that makes sense. It's something, I mean, eventually all of you will get kind of like a little instinct that tells you, this is a problem. Even knowing the client profile and be like, that's gonna be a problem. Me and Julio play it a lot. Like me and Julio are very close. I love Julio. But we immediately see it. We're like, this is gonna be a problem. And we keep mitigating it on the back end of the drawings. We need to mitigate it at the very beginning, because sometimes at the back end of the drawings, it becomes, and this is what our insurance said, it becomes a you said, I said, who said. And the law court, the courts protect the consumer. Just so you know, the clients are victims. That's how it is. Laws protect consumer. They don't protect professionals. Otherwise, consumers will have their own insurances. We have insurances because the law doesn't protect the professional. It protects the consumer, right? They're the victims. They don't know anything. You should have known better for them. Blah 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 blah. So we'll do that. I'm not gonna add much more to this. I think this is a great recap. I'll probably send this same text to all of you as an email, so you have it. And in projects you see appropriate, begin adding it. We'll have it also onto our Revit template soon. And we're gonna add a couple other things. So on the framing, let's make sure that do we have a consultant involved or not? Generally say, listen, and this is good to say, look, you can just think it. We're not structural engineers. We're not structural engineers. So whenever I say, well, this frame is like, we're not structural engineers. You can get your lumberyard to stamp it. You can get a third-party engineer, or we can hire another one additional service.
We shouldn't stamp.
So yes, that's another thing. So Julio saying, should we stamp those or should we not stamp those? If we're not calling them structural and we change the way we're naming them, I think it's okay to stamp them. We're certifying that those are valid joists that could generally work for pricing purposes, you know? So if we have all the text on that note, on our general framing and structural notes, I think that's gonna protect us. Again, we're walking away from having to do all of this, by the way. It's like a fine line because the 1 and 2 families generally are okay and they don't need anything extra, you know? So we're eventually not gonna have any of our own, only for design purposes, so that we make sure that the project works as we're designing it. But I think that, you know, we're walking away from that. I think me and Julio probably will have a couple samples together, and next time we connect, we'll probably pick it, you know, and create one and say, hey guys, this is what we have. What do you guys think? All right, does that work? Excellent. Thank you guys, and get back to work. Let's end it strong this quarter. All right, bye-bye.